They say forests are alive. But that night, the trees didn't just breathe, they spoke. It was a crisp autumn evening when I joined a few friends for an overnight camping trip deep in the Appalachian woods. We were excited to disconnect, roast marshmallows, and tell ghost stories around a fire. The leaves crunched beneath our boots as we set up camp, the golden sunlight filtering through the dense canopy above. By the time darkness fell, the air grew colder, and the wind howled through the trees, creating eerie sounds that played tricks on our minds. Suddenly, amidst the laughter, we heard a faint whisper. It wasn't coming from our group. It seemed to echo from the woods around us. A soft, unintelligible murmur. We dismissed it at first, blaming the wind or the tricks of a spooky atmosphere. But as the night deepened, the whispers grew louder and clearer. Words started to form. Leave now. They're watching. Nervously, we shone our flashlights into the darkness. The beams revealed nothing but endless trees. Yet, the whispers persisted, now sounding as though they were circling us. A loud snap of a branch behind us made us spin around, hearts pounding. When we turned back, the fire flickered violently, as if caught in a sudden gust of wind. The shadows of the trees seemed to move, stretching and bending unnaturally. Then we saw figures, tall and skeletal, blending with the bark, their hollow eyes staring at us from within the trees. Panicked, we decided to leave, but as we packed up, the whispers became deafening, repeating, "You can't leave. You're theirs now." The figures stepped out of the trees, moving unnaturally, their limbs creaking like old wood. Running blindly through the forest, the whispers followed us, now a cacophony of overlapping voices. It was as if the forest itself was alive, chasing us. When we finally reached the car, breathless and terrified, the whispers stopped, but not before one last chilling message. "You'll come back. They always do." The next morning, we swore never to return. But weeks later, strange carvings began appearing on my doorstep, symbols we had seen etched into the bark of those haunted trees. Story 2. There's a reason some campsites are left untouched, forgotten by time. My girlfriend and I were avid hikers, always seeking out the most remote spots to pitch our tent. This time, we found a clearing by a crystal-clear lake, surrounded by towering pines. It was perfect, or so we thought. As we set up camp, we noticed something odd, a ring of rocks in the center of the clearing, charred black as if someone had once made a fire there. Around it were scattered objects, rusted cans, torn fabric, and a single moldy shoe. It felt off, like we were intruding. That night, as we lay in our tent, the air was eerily still. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. Then, faint footsteps approached. At first, we thought it was an animal, but the steps were deliberate, slow, and heavy. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent. We held our breath, waiting for whatever it was to move. Instead, the zipper on the tent began to slide down slowly. My girlfriend screamed as I grabbed the flashlight, pointing it toward the entrance. Nothing was there. No person, no animal, no sign of anything. But on the ground where we had placed our food, something had been scrawled in the dirt. "Get out." Terrified, we packed up and began hiking back to the car in the dead of night. But the footsteps followed, always just out of sight. At one point, I shone my flashlight behind us and caught a glimpse of something, a gaunt, pale face peeking out from behind a tree. When we finally reached the car, the relief was short-lived. Scratched into the driver's side window were the same words, "Get out." We never spoke of that trip again, but sometimes, late at night, I hear those same footsteps outside my bedroom window. Story 3. They said the forest was empty that weekend. They were wrong. I often hike alone, enjoying the solitude and peace of nature. That weekend, I ventured into a national park known for its dense woods and challenging trails. By the time I set up camp, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the forest in shades of orange and purple. As I prepared dinner over a small campfire, I noticed a faint glow through the trees. Curious, I walked closer and discovered another campsite empty, but clearly used recently. A tent stood open with a sleeping bag laid out inside. A mug of coffee sat on a log, still steaming. I called out, but no one answered. The forest was silent, uneasy. I returned to my camp. Hours later, as I sat by the fire, I heard movement. Turning, I saw a figure standing at the edge of my camp, a man, dressed in a ragged coat, his face obscured by shadows. "Hello?" I called. No response. He stood there, unmoving. When I shone my flashlight on him, he was gone. The next morning, I found footprints circling my tent, large, heavy boots. I packed up and left, but the sense of being watched never left me. Halfway down the trail, I found something chilling. My sleeping bag, slashed to ribbons, hanging from a tree branch. As I stood there, paralyzed, I heard his voice, a low, guttural whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." To this day, I don't know who or what he was, but I've never camped alone again. Sometimes, though, when I'm hiking, I find footprints that aren't mine. If these stories gave you chills, you won't want to miss my next video about terrifying encounters in abandoned buildings. Click here to keep the scares going.